Today we're taking a look at how your lungs work.
Uh-huh.
We've got some excerpts from the NIH website and Cleveland Clinic's health library.
Great.
And,
Yeah.
I think most people probably know the basics of breathing, but I think we're going to find some surprising stuff in here.
Hey, so.
One of the things that I found really interesting
Yeah.
is that your lungs contain something like 150 million
Wow.
tiny air sacs.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And those tiny air sacs are just one part of this amazingly complex system that's vital for us to live.
Mm.
We take
Well-
breathing for granted, but it's really mind-blowing when you think about it.
I know it is. And we've all got to breathe. And,
Right.
you think about it and you're like, well, how does that actually happen?
Right, exactly.
So I guess maybe we should start with a real quick overview of what is the respiratory system? What does it do?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the primary function of the respiratory system is to take in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
It's all about this constant gas exchange.
Oh.
You can kind of imagine tiny little oxygen passengers hopping on board red blood cells in your lungs and then getting a ride all around your body.
Oh.
You know,
I like that.
and of course they need a return trip.
Right.
So the carbon dioxide kind of hitches a ride back to the lungs to be exhaled.
So we've got this intricate system where the air comes in through your nose and mouth. It goes down the trachea,
Yeah.
branches into the bronchi,
Right.
and then finally makes it to those tiny little air sacs called the alveoli.
And that's where all the magic happens.
Yeah.
It's where the oxygen moves from the air you breathe into your blood.
So you said millions of those little alveoli. What are they and how do they work?
Well, each alveolus is surrounded by this network of tiny blood vessels called capillaries.
Okay.
And both the alveoli walls and the capillary walls are super thin, which allows for rapid diffusion of gases. It's almost like they're these two thin membranes just swapping gases back and forth.
So the oxygen molecules, they're moving from the air in the alveoli, where they're more concentrated into the bloodstream, where there's less of them.
Right.
And at the same time, the carbon dioxide, which is more concentrated in the blood, is moving into the alveoli to be exhaled.
Exactly. It's like this perfectly choreographed dance of molecules happening millions of times per second in your lungs,
Oh my gosh.
driven by these concentration gradients.
Wow. So this all sounds so fragile and delicate.
Yeah.
How do the lungs actually stay inflated? How do those tiny little sacs not collapse?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The alveoli are coated with this special substance called surfactant.
Surfactant.
Yeah, and it basically acts like a lubricant, and it reduces surface tension in the alveoli.
Okay.
So think about it like a soap bubble.
Okay.
When you blow a bubble, the soap film helps it hold its shape, right?
Yeah.
Surfactant does something similar for the alveoli, preventing them from sticking together and collapsing.
Yeah. So it's like a built-in anti-deflation system.
Exactly.
Wow, that's cool.
Right. Without surfactant, breathing would be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I bet it would be.
Yeah.
Our sources also mention the pleura.
Yeah. The pleura is this double-layered membrane that surrounds the lungs.
Okay.
And it's got this thin layer of fluid between its layers, which acts as a lubricant.
Okay.
And that allows the lungs to glide smoothly inside the chest cavity during breathing.
Interesting.
So it's kind of like a friction-reducing shield that prevents wear and tear on the lung tissues.
It really is amazing how much is going on inside our chests to keep us breathing.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking about the airways, the air sacs, getting oxygen and getting carbon dioxide out.
Yeah.
But the respiratory system does even more than just breathing, right?
Absolutely. It plays a huge role in protecting you from harmful things and irritants.
Oh, okay. So how does it do that?
Well, your airways actually warm, moisten, and filter the air you breathe. And this is important because breathing in cold, dry air can really irritate your lungs.
Oh, okay.
And remember those tiny hairs, the cilia we talked about before?
Yeah. They sweep out the mucus and the particles.
Exactly. They work really hard to keep your lungs clean and free from those irritants.
Oh, so it's like a multi-layered defense system.
Yeah,
It's constantly keeping our lungs healthy.
that's a great way to put it.
So it's not just about breathing, it's about protecting us from all the stuff floating around in the air.
Right. And each step plays an important part.
Right. And all of this is working together so efficiently.
Uh-huh. But we're just scratching the surface.
Okay.
Because this complex system doesn't work in isolation. It relies heavily on other systems in the body.
So the respiratory system is part of a larger team effort inside the body.
Exactly.
This is getting interesting.
It really is all interconnected.
Yeah.
Think about the circulatory system for a second.
The heart and blood vessels.
Yeah, the respiratory system works so closely with the circulatory system.
Yeah.
The oxygen that gets into your blood from the alveoli
Right.
needs to get to every cell in your body.
Yeah.
And that's where the circulatory system comes in.
Right. It's like a big network of highways transporting all those oxygen passengers all around.
Exactly. The heart pumps that oxygen-rich blood
Okay.
from the lungs out to the rest of the body.
Right.
And then brings back the carbon dioxide-filled blood to the lungs to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's just this constant loop that keeps everything running smoothly.
It really is incredible how all these systems work together so well.
It is.
What about the nervous system? What role does it play?
Well, the nervous system is super important in controlling your breathing rate and depth.
Okay.
Your brainstem
Okay.
is constantly monitoring
Yeah.
the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen in your blood.
So like when we're exercising and our muscles need more oxygen, the brainstem is telling our lungs to work harder.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like an autopilot that's always adjusting your breathing to meet your body's needs.
Yeah. That's so cool. I mean, our bodies are so smart.
They really are.
But what about the lymphatic and immune systems? How do they fit in with all of this?
So the lymphatic system helps to drain extra fluid and waste products from the tissues in your lungs.
Okay.
And the immune system, of course, is protecting you from any infections that might try to get in through your airways.
Right. So it's like having a security team in your lungs watching out for anything dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. The immune system has all these special cells in the lungs that can identify and destroy bacteria and viruses.
This is really making me think about how everything in our bodies is connected.
It is.
But maybe let's switch gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about something practical. Our sources mention some important tips for keeping our lungs healthy.
Absolutely. And probably the most important one is
Yeah.
don't smoke.
Right.
I mean, it's the leading cause of lung cancer and other respiratory diseases.
Right.
It just damages those delicate tissues in your lungs and airways.
Yeah.
Makes it harder to breathe.
Makes sense.
Increases your risk of infection.
So even if we just did one thing to help our lungs, it would be don't smoke or quit if you already do.
Right.
What else can we do to keep all those millions of alveoli happy and healthy?
Well, regular exercise is another really important factor.
Okay.
When you exercise, your heart rate increases, your breathing increases,
Right.
and that strengthens your lungs
Hmm?
and helps them work more efficiently.
Yeah, I can feel that when I'm working out. My lungs are definitely getting a workout too.
Exactly. And speaking of working out,
Yeah.
have you ever had a side stitch when you're running?
Oh, yeah, those are so annoying.
Well, they can actually sometimes be caused by irritation of the pleura, that membrane we talked about earlier.
Oh, really?
All the extra movement from running can sometimes cause a little friction between those layers.
Okay.
And that's what causes that sharp pain.
Wow. I never knew that.
Yeah.
So what else can we do to keep our lungs in good shape?
Staying hydrated is incredibly important.
Okay, why is that?
It helps to keep the mucus in your airways thin and flowing. So it makes it easier for the cilia to do their job and sweep out all those unwanted particles.
I see. So if the mucus is too thick, it's not going to work very well.
Right.
Got it.
And finally, it's also important to get vaccinated against respiratory infections, like the flu and pneumonia.
Right. Vaccines are such a great way to prevent illness and protect our lungs from potential damage.
Absolutely. Prevention is always the best medicine.
I agree.
By doing all of these things, we can help keep our lungs working as well as they can.
So we've talked about a lot today.
We have.
The whole respiratory system, the tiny alveoli, how all of our organs are connected,
Mm-hmm.
and even some practical tips for keeping our lungs healthy.
Right.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I have a question for you, listener.
Okay.
We've talked about how all those millions of alveoli are constantly working, taking in oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought about how much air you actually breathe in a day?
Probably not.
Yeah.
It's not something that most people think about.
Right. We just do it
Yeah.
without even thinking about it. Right.
All the air that's coming in and out.
Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise,
Okay.
but I encourage you to go look up the answer.
Okay.
I think you'll be amazed.
Yeah, I bet I will.
Yeah.
And while you're at it, go do some more exploring. There's a ton of cool information out there about this system that keeps us going.
There really is.
Any final thoughts?
You know, this deep dive for me, it's really highlighted how important every single part of the respiratory system is
Yeah.
and how it all works together. All
Huh.
those tiny little alveoli to the airways.
It's really complex.
It is, and yet resilient.
And most of the time, we don't even have to think about it.
Nope.
It just works.
It's a testament to just how incredible our bodies are.
Right. And even though we don't have to think about it, we can definitely make choices that help keep our lungs healthy.
Absolutely.
So taking care of our lungs, making healthy choices, talking to your doctor when you need to,
Yeah,
it'll keep everything working well for years to come.
it really will.
So next time you take a breath, think about that journey the air takes from your nose to all those tiny air sacs,
It's amazing.
delivering oxygen to every single cell.
We take it for granted, but it's incredible.
It really is well said.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into how your lungs work. Until next time, keep breathing, keep learning, keep exploring.